What's going on, guys? I've got a really cool video for you today. We're going to be building an end grain cutting board, and I've got lots of different kinds of wood that we're going to put in this end grain cutting board. I've got some Paduak, Walnut, Osage Orange, Hickory, and Purpleheart. So we got a couple exotics with the Paduak and Purpleheart, and then we're going to put 3 domestics in there as well. One thing that I want to mention before we start just cutting this up and gluing it together is, just like everything else in life, you're going to achieve the results that you want if you put in the proper amount of preparation. So when you're building a cutting board or anything really, you're going to get the desired result that you want if you put the proper amount of preparation into it. So we're going to spend a lot of time milling this lumber up to the specs that we want it to be at before we actually start gluing it together. So if you guys decide to take on a project like this, make sure you put a lot of effort into preparing the lumber before you actually just start cutting it up and gluing it together. Let's get started. Over at the planer station, we're going to get both sides of every board nice and flat. Now we're going to joint one edge, and this edge will be the edge that goes up against the table saw fence. The next part's pretty self-explanatory, but we're going to take them over to the table saw and start cutting them into strips. Now that all the strips are cut, it's time to go ahead and lay them out in the pattern that you want. And keep in mind, this is not going to be the final glue up. We're actually going to cross cut this after this glue is dry. So a good idea is to maybe look at the end, and that'll give you kind of an idea of what your final pattern is going to look like. When you start cross-cutting over at the table saw, make sure you're using a miter gauge or a cross-cut sled. Going across the grain on a table saw can be dangerous, and you can get a lot of stuff flying at you that you don't want flying at you at a high rate of speed, so just be aware of that. Also, we're going to set the fence to the thickness we want the board. Since we're cross-cutting these, however thick these pieces are going to be is, once it's planed or sanded down, however you decide to do it, is going to be the final thickness of the board. And once we're ready for the glue up, we're just going to take them back over to the clamps, and we're going to alternate every other piece as shown in the video, and then apply a lot of glue, and then we will do the second glue up to achieve our end grain pattern. Now it's time to plane it for the last time. This is going to achieve the final thickness of the board. And I also want to mention right here that if you choose to flatten your end grain cutting board the way that I am using a planer, you want to take very small bites. You don't want to overload the planer with end grain wood in it. It's really not recommended to use any planer on end grain wood, but if you don't have a drum sander, this is about your only option. But a drum sander would definitely be the preferred method for this. Well, that does it for the end grain cutting board video. I really love the way the Osage Orange has the contrast with the rest of the colors in this particular cutting board. I think it turned out really beautiful. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to my channel.